All right, Shalom, just moving on. Page 34. The Mexican tradition is in perfect accord with the preceding testimony. They affirm that they traveled through Aztlan or Asia and had 104 domiciles during their migration. You can't get around that. The natives said that they came from Asia. All right? And they didn't talk about no Bering Strait. They said they came from the east. They didn't say they came from the west. Coming from the west would say, hey, maybe the Bering Strait bullshit was true, but it's not. All right, it says that the Indians, page 69, that the Indians were descended from the race of Quetzalcoatl. It's very important because Quetzalcoatl is their, version of Yahushua. For this reason, they held lineage in great account, like the Israelites did. And wherever they chanced be, they said, I am of such a lineage. So they knew their bloodline was very important. Page 72. And the proper name, Toplizin, does indeed bear a signification corresponding to God with us, which means God domesticated among men, and the full force of the expression is preserved in the term Toplitzin, which might be interpreted the son of man. For the Mexicans believe that Quetzalcoatl took human nature, like Yahushua did, upon him, partaking of all the infirmities of man, and was not exempt from sorrow, pain, or death, which he suffered voluntarily to atone for the sins of man. I might also add that if you look historically, Quetzalcoatl is more similar to Yahushua or Jesus than Horus or Heru. Because these Pan-African people, at the instigation of a guy by the name of Gerald Massey, say that, oh, Jesus and Heru are the same thing, or Horus, which is a lie. Page 77. Quetzalcoatl, in crossing the territory of Cholula, yielded to the entreaties of the inhabitants who offered him the crown. He dwelt 20 years among them, taught them to cast metals, ordered feasts of 8 days, and regulated the intercalations of the Toltec year. He preached peace to man and would permit no offering to the divinity than the first fruits of the harvest. So that sounds like all Hebrew customs right here. All Hebrew customs. All. Without exception. Page 79. They called the morning star after Quetzalcoatl. They say he took his name on occasion of his disappearance with respect to the appellation of Mexi or Mezetli. This is very important here. We brought this out at camp yesterday. The other name by which Quetzalcoatl was known among the Mexicans, it is very remarkable that it is precisely the same as the Hebrew word which signifies anointed. So the word Mexicans comes from a word Mexi, which, and the Mexi part I got from other historical sources, but this book just straight up says Mexicans. The word Mexican, Mexico derives from the Hebrew word for anointed, which is Mashiach. Mexican Mashiach. Check that out. The Virgin was represented in the Indian paintings of whom the great prophet should be born, and that his own people would reject and meditate evil against him and would put him to death. Accordingly, he is represented in the paintings with his hands and feet tied to a tree. So if that doesn't bring out the similarities between Yahushua and Quetzalcoatl over Horus, what do you have to say about Horus? I digress. In everything relating to the treatment of the Mexican children, even in the mode of punishing them, the Mexicans resemble the Jews. Reading on. In nothing did the civil policy of the Mexicans more closely resemble that of the Hebrews than in their dedicating their children to the temple and afterwards sending them to be instructed by the by the master or superior rabbi in the doctrines of their religion and moral and ceremonial laws. Plain and simple, the Israelites, the ancestors of the so-called Mexicans were Israelites. Salat. Torquemada says in the 20th chapter of the 8th book of his Indian Monarchy, so again, he's quoting sources, that the priests and ministers who lived in the great temple of Mexico were more than 5,000 who resided by day and by night within its walls, occupied in the service of the temple. Those priests are constantly named Levites by Acosta, and certainly that learned author may be excused for giving them that appellation, as the temple service of the Mexicans was in reality very like that of the Jews. The offerings of the Mexicans consisted, like those of the Jews, in the lives of animals or blood, incense, and the first fruits, which, like the Jews, they presented 3 times a year, which Torquemada undertakes in the following manner to explain. All right, let's see. Is there anything else here in this page? All right. Yeah, this is good. It's not great. I'm going to read it anyways. It's cool. This is really good. Cali was the proper name of a Mexican temple, and which may be recognized as forming a part of a compound name. The word Sina, which corresponds exactly with the word Sinai, the mountain from which the Most High delivered the laws and tables of stone to Moses. A lot of information out there. Just got to look for it. Page 97. Accordingly, we find that from New Mexico to the extreme province of Chile, Chile is Chile, where the tribe of Naphtali is from, which resisted successfully the invasion of the Incas, the same religion with different modifications of rites and ceremonies prevailed, and circumcision, although not universally practiced, was one of its characteristics. So they didn't all circumcise. That was off, but they, it proves further that they was Israelites, the fact that they did. Sahagun says in the 14th chapter of his first book, in mentioning the festival of Xuchilcuhtl, that the Mexicans ate on one of their fast unleavened bread. So they had the feast of unleavened bread. It deserves to be remarked that amongst the Jews, certain cities were appointed as cities of refuge to which criminals might fly and escape the punishment of the laws. So amongst the Mexicans and other Indian states, there were anointed places of refuge to which culprits might fly and claim the rights of a sanctuary. Now, this is important because it mentions Chile. So Chile is another tribe altogether, tribe of Naphtali. So we've already covered that Issachar, Asher, because it mentions the Peruvian Indians, and Naphtali, the Indians of all these places, kept customs from the Israelites of old. Right? Page 100. It is not a little curious that, according to Torquemada, the Mexicans should have been summoned to prayer at stated hours by blowing of horns, blowing trumpets, in the same way as the Jews, although they were acquainted with bells, and that, according to Garcia, they should have approached the temple with the same reverential custom of pulling off their sandals when within a certain number of paces distant from it. So, in holy places, they had to remove their shoes, just like the Israelites. Both nations, Hebrews and Mexicans, were most punctual in the payment of their religious offerings and first fruits. The Mexicans, as Montezuma informed Cortez, feared if they failed in this part of their religious duties that they would incur the severest vengeance. And the prophet Malachi, or rather God speaking through the mouth of that prophet, assures the Jews that they were under a peculiar blessing promised in the 3rd chapter of the book of Malachi. So all these are customs similar to the Israelites. The surplus of the provision contributed for the maintenance of the priest was distributed amongst the poor, so they took care of the poor, for whom also there were hospitals in all the larger towns. The high priests were the oracles whom the king consulted in all the more important affairs of the state, and no war was ever undertaken without their approbation. So they had to go to their elders to get the blessing to go to war. All right. Page 129. The ceremony of you know what? We already went into circumcision, so I'm not going to waste time. We already know that they circumcised. All right. Page 149. Very important. They count time, observes Dr. Boudinot, after the manner of the Hebrews. They divide the year into spring, summer, autumn, and winter. They number their year from any of those 4 periods, for they have no name for a year. And they subdivide these and count the year by lunar months, like the Israelites, who counted by moons, as their name sufficiently testifies. They began the year at the first appearance of the first new moon of the vernal equinox, according to the ecclesiastical year of Moses, star in the west. Damn, it's cut. All you that believe that the so-called Hispanics are not descendants of the Israelites, you're cut. All right, reading on. Las Casas confirmed that in Haiti, now Santo Domingo, so we're dealing with the tribe of Simeon, not the tribe of Levi yet. The inhabitants spoke corrupt Hebrew. They styled their judges or counselors kokome, come, which means wisdom, which is precisely the term by which the Jews all over Europe would designate a wise or learned rabbi. The northern tribes have preserved in many cases the primitive Yahweh, also Hallelujah. Vega confirms that Hali was the Peruvian term for praise or triumph, which is also the word in Hebrew. All right, page 182. The fact that Mexicans recording both in their paintings and songs the deluge, which means the great flood of Noah, the building of the Tower of Babel, the confusion of tongues, and the dispersed, being generally admitted by the Spanish writers on America, it is almost unnecessary to the authority of any particular author to prove what no one will deny, since Gomara, in his History of the Indians, describing the conference of Nicaragua with Gil Goncalves and the Casters, introduces this chief as putting a variety of questions to the Spaniards. Can't deny these facts, Israel. Page 184. The curious symbol of one serpent swallowing up others likewise occurs in the 19th page of the same MS. Not sure what MS means, but okay. It is not extraordinary that the Mexicans who were acquainted with one portion of the Exodus that relating to the children of Israel journeying from Egypt should also not have been ignorant of another. Whether the Indians of the islands of Santo Domingo and Cuba, whose language is said to have been half Hebrew, and who in many of their customs nearly resembled the Jews, practiced the same rites. So now we're going into Simeon and Manasseh. Nearly resembled, practiced the same rites as those in use among the Indians of the continent. It would be difficult to say, but that they possess traditions in common with them evidently derived from a Hebrew source is plain from the following relation of Torquemada, which we cannot refrain from inserting. It is true that the Indians of the Isle of Cuba say that they knew that the heavens and other things had been created, and they affirm by 3 powers, one of whom came from such a part, and the other 2 from other parts. They were perfectly informed of the deluge. The old men above 70 and 80 years of age reported that when first their countrymen settled in that island, an old man, knowing that the deluge was about to happen, built a large ship, in which he embarked with his household and many animals, and that he dispatched from thence a crow, which did not return, but stayed to prey upon the dead carcasses, and that he afterwards sent a dove, which came back cooing, and bringing a leafy branch which resembled a hop, but was not one, on which he quitted the ship, and made wine of mountain grapes, and became drunk, and having 2 sons, one of them laughed and said to the other, turned him into jest. But the other reproved him and recovered his father, who having slept off the effects of the wine, and knowing the impudence of his son, cursed him and pronounced a blessing on the other, and from the former the Indians of these countries were descended. So this goes. So we've covered Naphtali, we've covered Asher, we've covered Issachar, we've covered Manasseh, and we've covered Simeon. So we've covered 5 of the 10 tribes already in this book. And this book says the 10 tribes. So even though it's particularly talking about Issachar, it's talking about all the tribes. They have, page 192, they have a tradition among them that they came from another country and had traversed great water, which was in one place narrow and full of islands, where they had suffered great misery, it being always winter there, with ice and deep snows. This is the Chippewa, so now we talk about Gad. Page 228. Oh no, you know what? I'm gonna cut it here, and I'm gonna go to, cut it short.